Hey, Bridgepoint, thanks for joining us again in Holy Week, Easter week. We're focusing on these 8 days that changed forever, dating back to this past Sunday. That was Palm Sunday, the day Jesus entered Jerusalem to lots of fanfare, looking ahead to this coming Sunday where Jesus rose from the grave. These were 8 days that kind of studied Jesus' life through that 8-day period where he changed everything. But it's not just historical stuff we want you to know, because we think these 8 days matter for you, and they matter for me, and they matter for us today. We hope that out of these 8 days that you can actually find yourself in the story. If you've missed some of the content that we've put out already this week, please go back and watch that. I think you'll find it helpful, even encouraging in this time. But I'm excited for today. Maybe you've been reading the devotions for today or for some of the other days this week, and you're still left with questions of just saying, what does this mean to me? What did it mean that Jesus was doing those things? And how does that matter to my life today, now? Well, I'm glad you tuned in today, because I think we've got some answers that will at least get you a little bit closer to what you're searching for. Today we have Amy. Amy's one of our Bridgepoint staff members on our directional leadership team, our executive team. And the story, Amy, of how God's been working in your life is really special. It's unique. If you've been joining us, you know that a couple of the stories that we've shared already were both folks that grew up in the faith, grew up in Christian households. But Amy, that's not necessarily your story, is it? Tell us about your background and take us forward from there.
Yeah, growing up, my family didn't attend church, although I know my grandparents did. Maybe, perhaps every once in a while we would attend, maybe an Easter Sunday or something like that. I remember maybe a few of those growing up, but we didn't grow up with a church family or even really my brother and I, either one of us having an understanding of anything other than that, yes, there's a God, yes, he created us. But it sort of stopped there. I didn't really know anything about Jesus or who he was or what his death on a cross had anything to do with me.
Yeah. I'm excited that you're sharing with us today, because I think there's probably some people that are tuning in today that relate a little more with your story. No, not necessarily a faith background. Some questions, maybe been a part of some things here and there, but not necessarily the Christian upbringing. It's interesting that we're doing this on Holy Week, because about 15 years ago, you and your husband James went to check out a movie. 15 years ago. Tell us about that and what it was about.
Yeah, I for some reason, in retrospect, I could probably guess now, but I asked him to take me to go see Passion of the Christ. So obviously, I was becoming a bit curious about what this whole story might be about. So we went and saw it in the theater. So that was in 2004 is when it came out, and sat through the whole movie, except for there was a few parts that I actually couldn't sit through. I remember getting up and leaving the theater for a few minutes because it just seemed really, really intense. But when we were walking out of the theater, I specifically remember asking him, why did they kill him? Why did I knew, because I'd seen the statues on the church walls and in the paintings, that he did die on a cross. I did know that, although I didn't really understand who he was. But I thought for some reason, having seen the whole movie, that maybe the ending would be different, but it wasn't, and that was just a huge mystery to me.
Yeah, interesting. Clearly God was at work in your life, but it's not like you walked out of that movie theater saying, I got to figure all this out. I'm in. I'm done. In fact, a period of time went by before we see more links to the story. Describe that time. Describe where you were in life and what the journey was like.
So it had been about 6 years later. James and I had 2 little girls. I ran a small business, and on the surface, everything looked very, very good. We looked like we had it all together. We looked like this adorable, happy family. But in my really, really honest and private moments, I knew that it wasn't. I was just exhausted. And it even took me a while to figure out what I was exhausted from. But I came to realize that I was so tired of trying to earn acceptance and love and validation and purpose, and I was trying to find that in, my job and my friendships, and what I drove, or what my house looked like, or what I wore, or even what I physically looked like. I was going about it in, all these ways that were actually just wearing me out and wearing me down. And I had found myself at a bottom point, and I was just exhausted.
So you're a wife, you're a mom, you're owning a business, lots going on, and suddenly you're wrestling with all this inside. What's the faith part? Where does God come in? What did you do with those questions and those wrestlings?
So my older brother, I had noticed that over the past few years, at this point in time, that he and his family had become what I would call at the time religious. They started attending church and that type of thing, and they. But I noticed a change in him. He was still my obnoxious older brother, but there was a peace about him. He seemed more connected with his wife and his kids. There was just something different about him, and I knew enough to know that whatever that was, I didn't have it. So I started asking myself, like, what is that? Because I think that's what I'm missing. So one day I talked to him about it, and he confirmed that. He said, I know exactly what you need, and it's Jesus. And so he introduced me to him, gave me my first Bible, the Bible I still read, taught me how to read it. And that was the beginning of this story that I saw in the movie theater years before actually becoming relevant to me.
Yeah, that's really good. Give us a brief snippet, because it's not like that beginning of following Jesus, beginning to see yourself in the story, just made everything perfect. But how did that matter? How did the faith matter? How did Jesus being alive some 2,000 years ago, what did that mean for your day-to-day life as you discovered it?
I think the realization that that God did create me, He loves me, so much so that He sent Jesus for me. Discovering that truth, and not just reading about it or having somebody tell me that to be true, but me actually realizing and feeling and even in some ways taking ownership of that truth. The incredible amount of peace and rest that came in that, it just released all that other junk that I had cluttered my life with. I was able to just release it. I'm not perfect at that, but it's certainly a much more peaceful life and existence knowing that I don't have to earn these things, that they are given to me freely from God because of what Jesus did on the cross.
That's so good. So looking back now, this is 10 years ago, and today, looking back on the Amy of 10 years ago, or even the people that are tuning in today that are at that same point, they're asking questions, or they feel that tired, they're processing what's missing in my life, what's different about what I'm seeing. What's the encouragement? If you could go back to that Amy as she was processing and navigating that life, why would you tell her, work hard to find yourself in this story? What would you say?
I would just say that if you are tired, if you're feeling that, maybe your candle's burning at both ends, and those ends are about to meet, because that is for sure where I was. And if you're especially tired and you're realizing that, you are just scratching and clawing at trying to earn love or acceptance or purpose or meaning, you're asking these really, really big questions. I would just say that there's a really, really big God that has an answer to those questions, and you're not going to find those in anywhere else.
That's good. Amy, thanks so much for your vulnerability, for being willing to share. I hope that if you're tuning in today and you're asking those questions, that you're seeing a little bit of Amy's story that's touching your heart. So, Bridgepoint, I hope, if not yet, that at least this conversation is asking yourself, why would this story matter? And maybe that you're beginning to sense that this story is a little bit more impactful than maybe you've given it credit for. Stay tuned this week. We have more special stuff coming tomorrow, some live experiences that you're not going to want to miss as we continue to head towards Sunday of Easter. These 8 days changed forever. I hope that you're working to find yourself in the story. Thanks for joining us.